All right, good evening. I think we are live streaming on YouTube. If somebody can check that out, that would be great. And we are good to go. All right. Welcome. We're really glad that you're here, and we want to get started and be respectful of everybody's schedule. I'm Cheryl Kagan, very proud to be the secretary.
All right.
Okay, everybody should be muted when they come in, and only people with a first name and last name are admitted into the room. So if you have been inadvertently admitted, please make sure you rename yourself in the top right corner of your own box. Here's the way this is going to go. Many of you have been in these meetings before. Each of the delegates by seniority is going to give you an overview of what they're working. I will bat cleanup. We have a bunch of questions that were submitted in advance. And then if we have time, we will take questions live from the room. And looking forward to a dynamic conversation, as it always is. So thank you. I will recognize the elected officials in a little bit, but we'd like to get launched. And kicking us off is our very talented, most senior delegate, Julie Polakovich-Carr, former Rockville City Council member, who not only is on the House Ways and Means Committee, where she is very widely respected, she was just named by the Speaker of the House to a leadership position that I suspect she'll tell you about. She is also chair of the Montgomery County House delegation, which is a huge job, a huge responsibility, and sometimes a huge headache. So before we go to Julie, I'm just going to remind you, please stay muted. We want to make sure that that everybody can listen and engage, and there hopefully will be time for questions later. So Delegate Polakovich-Carr, floor is yours.
Thank you, Senator Kagan. Well, welcome everyone. Thank you for spending this chilly night with us this evening. It's great to get to speak with all of you. And I have to say, I really look forward to these events as we do them at the beginning of session and at the end of session each year. And I think it's a great opportunity for us to hear what is on you all's minds and what you all value in terms of the upcoming legislative session. I'm just going to give a heads up. I'm not feeling great this evening, so I'm probably going to be pretty brief and then be off camera until we get to the Q&A part. So please forgive me that. Well, let me just start with, I think, some of the big topics that are likely to come up this session and that seem to be on the collective conscious in Annapolis. Certainly the state's finances, affordable housing, childcare, public safety, transportation funding, just to name a few issues that we're already seeing a lot of discussion about. We're still early in session. Only a few hundred bills have been introduced at this point, but I am guessing that these will be areas of active debate this session amongst others. I just wanted to real briefly talk a little bit about the state's finances, recognizing that our own delegate Spiegel is on the Appropriations Committee and can speak to this a little bit more. But I think it is worth framing as we look ahead to this legislative session that the state's finances are not what they were the last couple of years. Maryland, like pretty much every state, was very flush the last few years because of federal pandemic aid. And those programs have largely wrapped up at this point. So we are kind of back to the before times in terms of where we're at. So this year we're looking at a shortfall of about $760 million in the general fund. Folks may have seen that there were additional shortfalls in terms of transportation funding that have been in the news for the last month or so. And these are big challenges. And I think one of the central debates for this session really, between the House, the Senate, and the governor and his administration is are we just going to make cuts to balance the budget? Because we are required to have a balanced budget every year. Only the federal government can keep borrowing money and basically print money. But for all of the rest of us and state governments and local governments have to balance the budget every year. So we can cut programs or we can look at revenues. And it appears, at least in the House, that there is going to be a serious conversation about where does money come from now? Where should it come from going forward? And are there opportunities to make our tax code fairer while maintaining some essential services and supports in the state, while also looking for efficiencies in our state government? So as Senator Kagan mentioned, I serve on the House Ways and Means Committee along with Delegate Vogel. So we're kind of the other money committee in the House. So District 17 is well positioned at this point in terms of these issues with the state's finances. I'll also say that Ways and Means has oversight for education and for childcare. I am the chair of the early childhood subcommittee. We know that the childcare industry is really hurting. It is broken, not just for many families who have small children in childcare, and we're in my own family only a few years out of that ourselves. But for many people who are childcare providers, the finances are just not working on the family's ends. It's too expensive, yet somehow it is not enough money for the businesses and for the people who are actually providing childcare. So this is another big topic that we are looking at in the House for this session. Just a couple of bills of my own that I want to speak to. So I think pretty much every year I come in here and say, oh, we have a very full plate. Well, it's true once again. Working on a number of election law bills, roadway safety, a little bit on housing, progressive tax policy, just to name a few of the topics. Very glad to be working with Senator Kagan on a couple of election law bills this year to recruit more election judges, which we've had a big shortage of really statewide for a number of election cycles at this point. And then also another bill to go after people who are defrauding political donors, or in some cases, they think they're even giving to a charity. It's been very hard to prosecute these fraudsters, and we're trying to give the state some more tools on that front to crack down. Otherwise, I'm bringing back legislation that I sponsored last year. It was a bipartisan bill with Delegate Mike Griffith, who is a Republican from Hartford County, to have more transparency when we have appointments made by our central committees to the General Assembly. As Ryan knows well, the Montgomery County Central Committee does have a very transparent process. That is not the case for every central committee, Democrat or Republican, across the state, and we want to bring some more transparency to that process. I'll say that bill is in addition to my own personal support for having special elections, but depending on the legislation that you're looking at, there is still the potential to have appointments kind of regardless, even if we do get some special elections. Otherwise, I'm also bringing back another bill that my friends in Rockville and Gaithersburg who serve in local government hopefully will choose to support again this year to crack down on vehicles that have illegally modified their exhaust systems. I continue to hear about this issue from many residents, and I see a lot of heads nodding. Yeah, if you live near, especially a state roadway, as I do, it is very loud and disruptive to communities. And these are people who are just like straight up breaking the law. This bill is enabling, and it would allow a city or county to use automated enforcement, basically like a speed camera, to detect these vehicles and to ticket them. And lastly, a new initiative I'm working on for this year is universal free school meals. I'm actually picking this bill up. It's the third year we are working on this. Former delegate Cheryl Resnick, who represented Germantown, had been the lead sponsor of this bill, but he has left the legislature, and I'm very proud to be picking up the mantle on this legislation. Simply put, we know that hungry kids don't learn well, and that is borne out in studies, but I think we all understand on an intuitive level that if you're hungry, you are not operating at your best. So we should be providing breakfast and lunch at school. We've been making a huge investment, and will continue to in the years to come, in public education as a state, as we rightfully should. And our Blueprint for Maryland's Future places a lot of emphasis on academics, on tutoring, on getting additional resources to the students who need it most. Those are all great things. We should do all of those things. But I think we also just need to recognize the basic fact that hungry kids are not going to learn well. So that we would, if we pass this, we'd be joining a growing list of states that have already enacted this legislation. So let me stop there. Looking forward to the Q&A. And Senator Kagan, are you going to introduce Delegate Vogel, or would you like me
I
to?
sure am.
Great. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Delegate Blokovich-Carr, and I'm sorry that you're not feeling well. Next up is going to be Delegate Joe Vogel, and even though he is just in his second year, he is the second most veteran member of our wonderful District 17 team, so that's exciting. Joe is doing great work on the House side, and he's awfully busy as he is also running for Congress. And I don't know, Joe, if you were planning on talking about that or not, but he's got a lot of irons in the fire and a lot of thoughtful bills. So, Joe. Your
Well,
turn.
thank you, Senator. And we got enough to talk about on the legislative side, so I'm going to stay focused on that tonight. And just another shout out to Delegate Plakovich-Carr, who I have the privilege of serving with on the Ways and Means Committee. And I'm so excited about that free school lunches meal, and look forward to fighting alongside you to get that over the finish line, because we know we need it. So look, I think the Delegate Plakovich-Carr did a great job outlining our legislature-wide priorities on the Ways and Means Committee. I'm on the statewide revenues subcommittee, so we will be closely engaged in any conversations around revenues and making sure that whatever budget decisions we make reflect our values. And that's going to be something that I'm very focused and principled on. I want to touch on, I'm going to quickly touch on 10 of the bills that I'm sponsoring this year, and I promise I'm going to keep it quick. I'm sponsoring, I think right now we're around 20 bills total, but there's 10 that I'm really excited about and have been looking forward to sharing with you all day. So first, many of you know that I've done quite a bit of work on the fentanyl overdose crisis here in the legislature last year. The only bill that we passed through the legislature on addressing the fentanyl overdose epidemic was the bill that I had authored to close the gap of fentanyl testing in hospitals. Interestingly enough, I took a tour of Shady Grove a few weeks after the last legislative session and saw how they were already putting that in practice, implementing that legislation, and it's going to have a pretty significant impact on how the state can respond to the overdose epidemic that we're seeing. This year, I'm coming back with 1, 2, or 3 pieces of legislation on Narcan specifically. We just had a meeting today to try to nail down exactly how we're going to approach it. But the biggest piece of this legislation is responding to something that the federal government actually did, which is allow for over-the-counter sale of Narcan. So you can go to a CVS or a Harris Teeter or a Walgreens and buy Narcan. The challenge is that it's $45, right, to buy over the counter. So I'm sponsoring legislation that would require insurance coverage and cap the copay at $10. Other states have done it. We got to do it here, and I'm happy to chat, further either in questions or offline about why this is so important. Number 2, Maryland is a state that has been leading the way on access to reproductive health care. The challenge that we have is in certain parts of the state, our reproductive health care clinics are under consistent threats and harassment and intimidation. And not only should you be able to access reproductive health care in our state, you should be able to do so safely and without fear. So I'm sponsoring legislation that would create a dedicated pot of funding, grant funding, similar to what we have for religious nonprofits, to fund security improvements and safety costs for our reproductive health care centers across the state. Working together with a nonprofit based right here in District 17 to address an issue in the foster care space, which is making sure that every child in the foster care system in our state has new luggage as they are moving to a new home, and ending the practice of trash bags, which we unfortunately are still seeing, and that has to be put to an end. So we have legislation that would require that, which we're working closely, as I said, with advocates based in our district. Two bills on labor. One is extending for our organizing laborers who are on strike after 14 days, extending access to unemployment insurance, right? If you are out of work because of a labor dispute, you still have to provide for your family, right? And we know that there's unions that have funds in place to be able to support their workers, but those run out after a certain amount of time. And some unions, smaller unions especially, just don't have those resources. I'm going way too long, so I'm going to keep it to just 2 more. One is a climate bill that I'm bringing back this year. We know that Maryland has been leading the way on addressing the climate crisis, but one space that I think we really should be leading on, and is also a tremendous economic opportunity for us, is in the climate innovation space. So I'm working very closely with the Maryland Energy Innovation Accelerator under the Maryland Clean Energy Center. And they're working with a range of different startup organizations across the state that are doing remarkable work, everything from innovative battery storage technologies to carbon capture to making alternative environmentally friendly forms of wood, right? But they aren't getting the early stage funding that they need to be able to succeed. So we're creating an investment fund for those startups. And the projections are that within 5 to 7 years, that fund would actually be repaid through those investments. And the last bill that I'll talk about quickly is one that you might remember that I brought forward last year in working with a number of young advocates across the state. And that is to regulate weight loss supplements, regulate the sale of weight loss supplements to minors. Right now, if you are, 13, 14 years old, you can walk into a CVS and buy any of these dangerous, unregulated products that, promise that you'll lose 5 pounds overnight or burn body fat or whatever it is that we know have harmful health effects and contribute to the development of eating disorders. So it is a very challenging bill technically. So I actually just had a meeting today with the retailers to figure out exactly how we're going to get it across the finish line this year. New York got it passed. I want us to be next. So that's all I have for now, but look forward to answering your questions and seeing many of you over the course of our legislative session. Senator, back to you.
Excellent. Great job. Thank you, Delegate Vogel. Next up is our newbie. I think a lot of you know him because Delegate Ryan Spiegel has a new title, and he, after many years on the Gaithersburg City Council, was chosen by our Democratic Central Committee to succeed former Delegate Kumar Barve, our friend and longtime leader. So Ryan earned a slot on the Appropriations Committee, which is huge. And at least in part, it's because of his long record of service, including as the statewide president of the Maryland Municipal League. So Ryan, take it away.
Thank you, Senator, for that kind introduction. Good to see so many friends on the Zoom here, including former Delegate Kumar Barve. I think you said I succeeded him. I think that's fair to say. I will never say that I replaced him because he's impossible to replace. But we're happy to have him with us tonight, and I consider him a mentor and friend. And now he is a commissioner on the Public Service Commission, and we look forward to working with him in that important role. As the senator mentioned, I'm on the Appropriations Committee. I'm also on the subcommittees within Appropriations that deal with public safety and administration, as well as with pensions. And I have to say, my first week of session as a delegate gave me inspiration, gave me great experiences, and unfortunately also gave me COVID. But fortunately, it was a very mild case, and I was able to quarantine and work from my hotel room here in Annapolis and watch committee briefings and floor sessions remotely. And consistent with CDC guidelines, I was back at the office today wearing a mask. And I want to thank my District 17 colleagues for their support and guidance during the last few days as I dealt with that. I've got a few bills I'm working on, but I really see the work of the Appropriations Committee as my primary responsibility this session, as we are tackling the big structural challenges in how to fund transportation and the rest of the budget. As Delegate Polakovich-Carr said, for the last couple of years, our state, along with every other state, really benefited from that major influx of federal COVID rescue dollars. And when I learned back in July of 2023 that I'd be joining this committee, I thought, this is great. I'll be able to help deliver significant resources to District 17 and to Montgomery County. But that spigot is being turned off now. And to make matters worse, Maryland uses a dedicated pot of money, which some of you are familiar with, called the Transportation Trust Fund, to pay for transportation projects and infrastructure maintenance in the state. And this fund gets its revenue in turn largely from the gas tax and vehicle registration fees. But with lots of people now working remotely or in a hybrid model after COVID, and with a lot more fuel-efficient vehicles and a lot more EVs, electric vehicles, on the road, the amount of money coming into that transportation trust fund is a lot less than it used to be. And meanwhile, the cost of construction and maintenance has gone way up due to things like inflation and labor shortages and supply chain issues. And the Transportation Trust Fund is also the source of important dollars for our local governments based on certain state law allocation formulas. This includes highway user revenues, or HURs, and locally operated transit systems funding, or LOTS, which includes things like the Montgomery County Ride-On Service, both of which were facing big cuts in light of these realities. And these dollars are absolutely critical, particularly in District 17, where we've got not only Montgomery County government, but we've got the city of Gaithersburg and the city of Rockville, which rely heavily on the highway user revenue funds. And I spent a lot of years as a municipal official fighting to maintain those highway user revenues for local governments. And the governor's administration released their budget today, actually, as required by a deadline in the state constitution. And I have to say, fortunately, the administration just announced a one-time transfer of $150 million from the general fund into the Transportation Trust Fund for fiscal year 2025, which is the next coming fiscal year for the state. And that ensures that we can fully fund those highway user revenues and other local transit system revenues, fund fees that will go to Montgomery County and go to municipal governments and some other items for at least one more year. One more year, but that's just for 1 year. And it's not a sustainable way to fund transportation through our general fund going forward indefinitely. And we still have in the budget roughly $3 billion of shortfall in our state transportation projects budget plan, which we call the Consolidated Transportation Program, or the CTP. And in the out years, a projected $2 billion deficit in the state budget. So we are exploring ways to do a long-term fix of the Transportation Trust Fund. And we don't know yet what that fix is ultimately going to look like. But with the support of my committee chair, I'm actually working on a bill to create regional transportation authorities in Maryland, similar to what Northern Virginia has already done very successfully, to try to establish a reliable and consistent and sufficient funding mechanism dedicated to transportation investment in the capital region and maybe separately in the Baltimore metropolitan region as well. And look, it remains to be seen if that idea is going to gain any traction, but I think at the very least, it can help influence the larger discussion that we're having on the budget and transportation funding. So stay tuned for more on that as we proceed with those budget hearings in committee. I want to briefly also mention I have a bill to expand financial empowerment programs around the state that I'm working on. I have a bill to address the gun violence epidemic by allowing local governments to do more than they're currently allowed to do under state law. And I did want to briefly mention that this week, the 20 Jewish members of the General Assembly announced the creation, with the blessing of the leadership of the House and the Senate, of a brand new Maryland Legislative Jewish Caucus, which is put together for the purpose of speaking out against anti-Semitism, working with allies to provide education and support for our Jewish communities and education to the rest of the state on the challenges of anti-Semitism. And ultimately, I think we're going to be taking some positions on some policies and legislation in support of religious freedom and civil rights and security and safety for minority communities, not just the Jewish communities, but other minority communities around the state who need that support. And so this is an exciting new development. It's not often that new caucuses are created. It's unfortunate that we live in times where we think that, this is really something that's needed. But we look forward to working with the members of the caucus and all of their allies to really continue to push to make sure that Maryland is a state where everybody feels welcome and safe and people's backgrounds can be celebrated. So that's all I've got for now, and I'm looking forward to your questions. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Delegate Spiegel. I like calling you that new title. You're gonna do great. I want to recognize that we have a lot of current and former elected officials. I'm going to do these fast because we have a lot more to cover. We have a lot of the Rockville Mayor and Council here. I believe that I saw council members Barry Jackson, Adam Van Grack, Marissa Valeri, and Kate Fulton. Congratulations, they are all newly elected and doing great. Let's see, we have the mayor of Washington Grove, John Compton, our good friend. Former Gaithersburg Council members Yvette Monroe and Dolly Kildee. From the Central Committee, we have the wonderful Jason Spiegel, and then we also have Jennifer Hosey, Lisa Smith, Teresa Werman visiting from other districts. So we're glad that you all are here. Thanks for the work that you do. Delegate Spiegel mentioned that our wonderful former delegate Kumar Barve was here. And then I always give a shout out to Margie Graff, the CEO of the Rockville Chamber of Commerce. So I want to start by recognizing my staff, many of whom are in the room, maybe all of whom are in the room, and starting with, all right, I don't know how we're going to do this. Yeah, I think we're not going to be able to do this. Okay, whoever is. I don't know what just happened. Okay, so Justin Butler, my chief of staff, Rachel Robin, my legislative and communications person. We have Susan Burkett, who handles so many website issues. We have Jordan Loring, who's here and is doing terrific work, as is Hianu Rowe, both of whom are talented interns. Karen Zapansky, who's been working for several years with me on election stuff. And I may be leaving. We have just a wonderful Bronte Nevins may be here. She helps with my podcast, Kibitzing with Kagan, and she helps produce those. So with that, I'm just going to dive into to some of the many issues that I'm working on that I want to flag, and then we will take your questions. So I think many of you know that in the Senate, there are just 4 committees, and my committee is education, energy, the environment, and I always say, and elections, because we also have that. We also have ethics. I am vice chair and deeply involved in some of the very many exciting issues. We had a briefing on energy the other day. We just had the new superintendent of education yesterday. And today we had artificial intelligence, AI, one of the hottest issues that's going to be at the forefront this year, this session. And so it's always a different thing in our committee. And we're going to be doing a lot of election bills. I'll get to those. At the national level, I continue to do my work in Maryland and at the national level on Next Generation 911. I've also been appointed to a National Election Assistance Commission. There are only 2 state legislators, 1 Democrat, 1 Republican. I was chosen as the Democrat for that. So I really get the benefit of a national perspective on some of these issues, which is exciting. I'm also vice chair at the National Conference of State Legislatures of the Election and Redistricting Commission. Death with dignity, end of life option, compassionate choice, whatever you call it, that will end up being a big issue. It has already been discussed. Our fiscal situation, the governor, whose 1-year anniversary is tomorrow, released his budget today. And so that will obviously be a huge focus. Public safety is a lot on many people's minds. In some areas, there are serious problems. In others, we can just do better. So again, 911, as well as 311, 211, 988, the crisis and suicide hotline. Please make sure you know about it, and especially the young people in your lives know about it. Freedom to serve. Working on it with the delegate from the next door district, Delegate David Fraser Hidalgo, a former police officer. We have a crisis in hiring and recruiting police officers. This gives a path for people who have been honorably discharged from the military, who have served our nation and now want to serve our communities, but they are not yet citizens. And so we want to give them this path, just as we did with my bill last year to allow healthcare licensures for people who are not yet citizens, but want to serve and take care of people, and as we face a crisis there. We've got a lot of bills, and I'm not even going to touch on all of them. But I will mention that today I had my first bill hearing. It's my green bill. It is environmental. It addresses the climate change by helping nonprofits, and it creates a revolving loan fund so that nonprofits who often work on a shoestring can get the upfront money to put solar panels on their roof and other climate solutions like that. It has passed the Senate unanimously twice, but it has come through late. We are hoping to plow it through really early, and having an early hearing and hopefully an early vote will bode well for that. Elections, as Delia Polakovich-Carr mentioned, I spend a lot of time on elections, and last year I think I had 8 election bills. I believe I'm going to have more than that this year, which is kind of astonishing. Everything from ranked choice voting in the 2028 presidential primary election only. You guys are hearing it first. That bill has not even been filed yet. It has not even been drafted yet, but I'm excited about that. I think it's time for people to learn about how to vote so you can express a preference and not feel like you only get one choice. So that's exciting. The special elections that have been mentioned already, we've got a bill hearing coming up in a week or so. Threats to election workers, which is a huge problem nationally. That has been an issue I've worked on, and I was honored that the governor announced that he is putting that as part of his package. So if it's got the governor's name on it, it's likely to get more visibility, more awareness, and pass even more quickly. So I'm thrilled about that. Simplified ballot language. Sometimes we get ready to vote and everything looks like gobbledygook and we don't understand it unless we have some postgraduate degree. You know, we have no idea what it is that we are supposed to be deciding. And so a few states have passed that. I passed it in the Senate several years ago. We're bringing it back because other states have enacted it. I think we can get it through this year. Consumer protection continues to be a passion, and we're working on a couple of those, including my gas price gouging, which I tried to do statewide and kept kind of hitting a brick wall. But thanks to our own council member Sydney Katz and council member Gabe Albornoz, we were able to pass that. It is law in Montgomery County that you can't have the big illuminated sign saying the cash price, which less than 10% of customers will pay, and then have a teeny tiny roadside sign that is significantly higher. So that kind of bait and switch, as Attorney General Brian Frost used to call it, is just untenable. It is now law in Montgomery County. It is now law in Prince George's County. We got it done there as well, unanimously. It has been introduced in Baltimore City, and we hope to continue to work towards getting it statewide. The last couple things I want to mention is civic excellence. We've got a couple of education bills, civic excellence, as well as gun violence training and making sure that our teachers, staff, students, and parents are aware. Nothing traumatic, nothing that needs, that is going to really impair the children or the parents, but we need to make sure that there is an awareness and a practice. Delegate Jared Solomon and I just sponsored that bill, dropped it today. Telehealth. Students need privacy. They need better access. We don't want to take them out of class longer than they need to. I've passed 2 telehealth bills in the past. I'm working on another one with a delegate. And we also have projects that we like trying to bring home the bacon, bring home funding, state funding for projects that we think are worthwhile in our district. And we have a really good record of bringing home projects for the city of Gaithersburg, the city of Rockville, and for key nonprofits. And so if anyone's interested, we can tell you a little more about that, but we've got some good projects we're working on. I encourage you to watch my Kibitzing with Kagan. You should definitely subscribe to my YouTube channel. It's quick and easy to do. It's one little click and you can be notified of some of what I do. Some of the people I've chatted with. I am almost finished with the Moore Miller administration cabinet, as well as a drag queen, a political consultant, nonprofit leaders. It's varied and fun. And the two last things, scholarships. We all give away scholarship funding and we want you to know about it. We want your nieces, nephews, grandkids to know about it. And so we encourage you to help spread the word. These deadline is passed now for spring semester, for the current semester, but in a few months, we'll be giving out a lot of money for the fall. Lastly, my chief of staff created a portal that is now on my website. Thank you, Susan Burkett, also. And through that, it's easy to get in touch with us for information about problems you're having with a state agency, information about scholarships, or expressing your views on some pending legislation. So lots more, but I'd like to start reading some of the questions that you all submitted in advance. And thank you again for participating and for submitting those. So several of you submitted about death with dignity or end of life options. So Delia Polakavich-Carr, I don't know whether you've got the ability to be back on camera, but what I'd like to do for some of these is just kind of do a quick thumbs up, thumbs down, or sideways or something. I think we can show that the four of us are strongly supportive. I will be a co-sponsor again. Anything briefly? Julie, Ryan, Joe, good, thumbs up, death with dignity.
Signed on to co-sponsor this morning.
Okay, Ryan, Delia Spiegel, you good?
Yeah, I haven't seen the bill yet, but I'm conceptually supportive of the idea.
Okay, great.
And I've co-sponsored as well.
Excellent. Next, and these are political, they're legislative, they're all the things. 495, 270 road widening projects. That has been on the agenda. Which of you guys, I'll start it, which is Larry Hogan, former Governor Hogan, had a terrible project. It was not collaborative. It was expensive. The tolls were insane. Many of you were involved in speaking out. While we do need some solutions, we thought this was a bad solution. Governor Moore was very clear. He kind of tossed that out, started over, and has been working on that. Does anyone want to add anything? Any of the delegates?
Yeah, I'll just add, and in the context of what Delegate Spiegel was talking about before in terms of the transportation cuts, on the one hand, we've had this road widening project moving ahead under two administrations now. And then on the other hand, because of the current fiscal situation, we saw MARC train service, which we know serves Gaithersburg and many points north, was actually on the chopping block. Now, thankfully, the $150 million that Delegate Spiegel referenced that was restored for just this year does restore MARC train service to keep it where it's at, and also does proceed with the long plan for expansion of service to have midday service. So, in my mind, this really is key. If we're concerned about traffic on I-270, which we should be, there needs to be viable alternatives for people. So I was very glad to see that at least for this year, we're keeping MARC train service in place and moving ahead with that expansion, but hope, that's not solid for future years. We have to find the funding for subsequent years.
Okay, next question. There are so many great questions here. There are many questions about raising revenues and whether there are going to be tax increases. So Julie and Joe, you're both on the Ways and Means Committee. Why don't you speak to tax revenue?
Certainly. I think we're going to see a lot of proposals debated this session. I'm sponsoring a few myself that the details will be coming out about in the next week or so. But I think there's kind of two layers to this. One is plugging the state's budget needs. And then the second part is for all of our county governments. Now, Montgomery County actually right now is doing pretty good, better than the state. They have a little bit of a surplus, but that is not the case for every, all 23 other counties across the state. And especially as we look into the, a few years out for the needs for education, for public schools, we need to give some more tools to our local government. So I think there's the piece of let's get some enabling legislation in place so that local governments can raise the money that they need for education or transportation projects. And then there's also the issues on the state side. So I think there's going to be pretty much anything that you can think of that raises money is going to be in this session. I'm not saying they're all moving. I don't know that any will move this year, but I think there's going to be a pretty wide-ranging conversation on this.
Joe, anything you want to add?
Yeah, I'll just add briefly. one of one bill that I was a floor leader on that Delegate Charcuti and also from Montgomery County sponsored last year was to provide more transparency on which of the largest corporations in our state pay an effective tax rate of 0. Right, and I'm really curious to see the data on that I think we should be getting sometime soon. But that is part of this conversation that we need to be having, and obviously being sensitive to the fact that we want businesses to stay here, but when we have a significant number of the largest corporations in our state not paying their fair share, that's a problem.
Okay.
Senator, can I just briefly add something, if that's okay?
Yeah.
I know that Delegate Chris Fair, who's from Frederick County, has a bill that would enable counties to charge a differentiated property tax rate for commercial property versus residential property. Currently, municipalities in the state already have that authority, but counties do not. And so that's another thing that's being explored, to allow them to charge a higher property tax rate on commercial properties to generate some more revenue for the counties, and potentially lockbox or dedicate any of the additional revenue generated by such a tax to certain purposes, whether it's to help counties fund the blueprint for education or to help them fund transportation projects.
Okay. So one of the other issues that a lot of people were worried about is housing, affordable housing, available housing, housing stock, smart growth, all of that. Now, these are often county issues, but this year we're going to be doing some housing issues. Julie, do you want to address that?
Sure, and I'm sure Delegate Spiegel has some thoughts on this one too. The governor and his administration are sponsoring several bills on this front. I think overall they are a very good setting a higher floor, let's say, for a number of jurisdictions in our state that have not been as successful as Montgomery County and Rockville and Gaithersburg at building housing at all price points. So, I mean, I think that's important because we do have a big housing need statewide. I think it's something like 85,000 affordable housing units short currently statewide. About a quarter of those are in Montgomery County. And again, those are current needs. Governor's package, we'll see where things go. I think some pieces are probably safer and less contentious than other bits. But I will say one criticism that I have heard in our county and from several parties is it's probably not going to change much in Montgomery County. So that's not to criticize the governor's package. Again, they're looking statewide, but because Montgomery County and our municipalities have been such a leader on this issue, I think we need to keep thinking and trying to innovate on that front. And I'll say that last thing, that one of the issues that the county executive and the county council have flagged as one of their top priorities for this session is some additional funding from the state for their housing matching fund. And so they've been doing some pretty innovative things in terms of bonding authority to create more affordable housing. And we're hoping to deliver some additional resources on that front as I wear my hat as delegation chair.
And Ryan, do you want to add something?
I will just briefly say, the challenge for those of us who really want to make sure that we protect the local control of the municipal governments and the county government, particularly the municipal governments in District 17, which really have the land use authority in District 17, with the commitment to making sure that we create more affordable housing and just generate more supply and put everything on the table to try to do that. It's going to be an interesting conversation because one of the priority bills that the governor rolled out, it contains a provision that's quite limited, and we'll see how it may evolve over the course of the session, but essentially supersedes or preempts in a very limited way some of the local zoning authority and land use authority around transit centers. So we're going to have a real honest discussion about prioritizing affordable housing and making it work. And then the other thing I'll just mention is one of the governor's priority housing legislation pieces also involves significantly strengthening renters' rights. And I think Delegate Palakovich-Carr is correct that it may not change too much in Montgomery County because we have some fairly robust protections, although those can always be reevaluated and strengthened. But statewide, there's going to be, if this passes, some good new protections for renters that include the creation of an Office of Tenant Rights in the state's Department of Housing and Community Development, as well as some increased fees on landlords who want to begin eviction proceedings, and some other things that are designed to protect renters a bit more.
Thank you. Shifting to another topic that was common. Joe, why don't you kick us off on environmental legislation that either you're working on or you're supporting or partnering with others? And you are muted. Thanks.
Yes, so I briefly mentioned that one bill that I'm working on that I'm really excited about, again, because of the economic potential, right? We know that you look at other states and they are creating thousands of jobs in this climate economy. And I think we could play a leading role in creating those jobs, creating those businesses, creating the economic growth that we know we need, right? As we're talking about these conversations around revenue, the more we grow our economy, the more revenue we have, right? And climate presents a major opportunity for us to do that. So look forward to discussing that bill as it moves along. One more bill that I'm working on, and I believe that I signed a co-sponsor this week, is the Renew Act, which provides funding for climate adaptation, recognizing that we still have to curb emissions, but because of inaction for too long, we are going to face some of the consequences of the climate crisis, and we need to be ready. I mean, right here in Annapolis, the day before the legislative session, there were, it was 5-6 feet of flooding outside of our hotel, right? So this is happening, and we need to make sure that we are prepared for the consequences of the climate crisis and making the necessary infrastructure investments.
Yes. And the Moore Miller administration and Secretary Serena McElwain are fully committed and looking for opportunities, learning nationally and leading nationally on environmental issues. Let's pivot. We are a Democratic caucus as well as legislators, and we got questions about the presidential election, which is this year and terrifying. So I think I'll start with that, and then if any of you want to join in. This is not an election year where we can sit on the sidelines. We're watching the terrifying nature of a possibility of Donald Trump returning to the White House, and whether that's shooting his opponents, denying rights, pardoning January 6th insurrectionists, the looming deprivation of our civil rights is just horrifying. And so I think as Democrats, as activists, as sane people who care about important issues, we've got to make sure that we are in touch with our friends, colleagues, cousins, especially in purple states or even violet states. And we've got to make sure that they are focused on the perils of another possible 4 years of Donald Trump. Elisha Belbladia, who is such a remarkable District 17 Democratic caucus leader. Ellie, thank you. Why don't you add just a couple of words on what you're going to be doing and how people can engage in the presidential election this year?
Well,
you're muted. In the meantime, while you're unmuting yourself, no, come on, we want you. Gaithersburg's wonderful mayor, Judd Ashman, is just joining the room. So I just want to recognize that Mayor Ashman has just joined us.
Hi,
Ellie,
everybody.
hey.
Okay, I think I'm unmuted. Yeah,
You're
I don't
good.
know what back and forth. Okay. Maryland is often considered a safe state for the Electoral College. We'll have to see how that goes. But there are always a lot of efforts in surrounding states that are sponsored by all kinds of different groups. And District 17 Democratic Club at gmail.com. You can always email me and find out what's going on. Some of you are already on my distribution list, but Virginia's looking more and more safe, but you never know. We go to Virginia, we go to Pennsylvania for sure, because we've got the proximity. So for Biden, for certain congressional races, there's always people going to these other states, and there's more and more letter writing. There are many, many things that you can do. There are groups like Swing Left. There's a really good group out of Silver Spring. Believe me, there are many groups. If you want to message me in the chat, I'll tell you how to reach me about this. It'll start, it'll start any day now.
Absolutely. And in our own backyard in District 17, the 6th Congressional District is going to be among the most watched nationally. There's also the 3rd District elsewhere, which is less swing, but also something we'll be concerned about. Justin, if you could put the link, please. There's a District 17 Democratic Club Facebook page. Encourage you all to take a moment and just join that briefly now, and Justin will put that in the chat. Joe, anything you want to add?
Sure. Look, I had a meeting yesterday where we discussed, we had a conversation that really put into context what this election means for Maryland, right? You think about the progress that we've been able to make because of the partnership between the governor and the White House. You think about, the FBI headquarters. But there's one issue in particular, the FBI headquarters. If Trump becomes the president again, I don't think they're going to be staying in Maryland, right? So that's one example of what's on the line here. The governor today, which I was going to mention, I'm really excited about, just opened up an Office of Gun Violence Prevention and fully funded it today. That's in partnership with the White House Office of Gun Violence Prevention, right? All that kind of collaboration is gone because we know that President Trump is not going to prioritize gun violence prevention. I will just one more piece that I thought about yesterday, and it is just it's weighing heavy on me. We've had a conversation for some time in the legislature, and it was a big issue last session, and I believe it will be this session, and hopefully we will get it across the finish line, which is the Access to Care Act, which is expanding access for undocumented individuals. This is not free health care, it is access to the Maryland State Health Exchange, and that legislation would trigger the request for a federal waiver. If Trump becomes the president, right, that federal waiver, the ability for us to get that and provide access to health care to hundreds of thousands of Marylanders that need it. And I saw Art talked about hospital wait times, right? These people are ending up in hospitals because they can't access primary care. If we don't get this done this session and Trump becomes the president again, right, there's no way we're getting that done, right? So that, again, urgency for why we need to get that done this session, but also an example of the consequences that lie ahead if we don't hold the presidency.
So, Joe, I'm going to add that one of the reasons that Maryland is ranked 50th, I kid you not, we are 50th worst waiting times in the nation. And part of that is because of the shortage. And that is our healthcare crisis, because we can't get doctors, physicians, assistants, social workers, veterinarians, all the things, which is why the licensure bill that I passed along with Delegate Leslie Lopez and Delegate Jocelyn Pena-Melnick this year and is now law is really critical. I'm going to totally pivot for a second. Our friend Lenny Levy just wanted to know, how are each of you doing? Which is so sweet. And then I'm going to pivot to some similar things. So Julie, you've already indicated that you're kind of not feeling so great. Ryan is recuperating from COVID. I had nasal surgery between Christmas and New Year's, which is not nearly as fun as going to the, Bahamas somewhere and relaxing. Joe, what you got?
We're working hard, but I have a good team around me, so it's all good.
All right, the next question kind of along that area. Sharon asked, how can we learn the substance and correct numbers for bills on which we might want to speak up for or against? Justin, if you would put on the Maryland General Assembly website, it's pretty good, and you should be able to search it reasonably well. And so that's coming up. That is now in the chat. And
I just add that if people have questions, feel free to reach out to us. We can
absolutely
help you figure out if there's been a bill introduced. If you're interested in testifying, reach out to any of our offices and we'll assist.
And Margie Graff says the Rockville Chamber has a bill tracking on her advocacy page, and there are many advocacy organizations. So whatever it is you care about, whether it's League of Women Voters and transparency in elections, whether it's animal rights, whether it's environment, go to the group that you care about and go from there. Again, thank you to everybody who submitted questions in advance. We still have many, many more. Stacy wanted to know how we're going to keep constituents involved during the legislative session. What is the best way for constituents to express their opinions? And so I already mentioned the portal that is now on my website. Justin, if you would post that, that's a really easy way. CherylKagan.org/casework. Let's go in reverse order. Ryan, how should they contact you? How can they stay involved and connected to you? And then
I try to be as available as I can be on every social media platform, but probably the best way to make sure that your views are logged relative to particular legislation is to email our House office address.
Okay, great. Joe put his personal cell phone in the chat. Those of you in the room have access to it. I don't think I'm going to read the number out loud onto YouTube. Julie, Delia Palakvishkar, how would you like to add? What would you like to add to that?
Yeah, whatever people feel comfortable with, I would give a +1 on sending an email to my office. That's the best way, because sometimes my inboxes get a little overwhelmed, so my staff can assist and make sure things are at the forefront there. But really, please don't ever hesitate to reach out. All 4 of us are here to serve you.
Yes.
May I ask a question, Cheryl?
Nope, not yet, Carl. There are still many other questions, and there are a lot of people who have questions. COVID-19 is back, as Delegate Spiegel indicated. Rosalie wanted to know about what we think we should be doing in terms of masking and all that. Julie, since you've had too much experience, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, there's new guidance in place now in terms of medical settings. I'll say personally, I continue to mask in Annapolis. I think that's why I'm especially frustrated that I'm not feeling well tonight. But people should take care of themselves, take care of their community, and especially as the numbers have been spiking here, more precautions are probably good for everybody.
Anything, Joe, you want to add? And then Ryan?
Yeah, I'll be quick. A bill, this reminds me of a bill that I'm working on this session that I didn't get to mention earlier, which is on pandemic preparedness and long COVID. So requesting that the Department of Health create a report, seeing what we learned from the last, from COVID-19, recognizing that it's not fully gone away yet, to see where we are in terms of preparedness for the next pandemic, which unfortunately one day may or will come, and also looking into long COVID, the effects of long COVID, and what we can be doing as a state to better support those still dealing with long COVID.
Yes, that's huge. Ryan.
I just want to briefly add, I mentioned earlier that my symptoms this past weekend were very, very mild, almost undetectable. And I like to think that's because I was vaxxed and boosted. I want to encourage everybody who hasn't gotten the new bivalent booster, which is like the new one that is supposed to really give you better coverage. Please go out and do that. That is one of the best things you can do to protect yourself. Even if you get COVID, the symptoms will hopefully be much, much more mild. And if you are feeling under the weather, you can test to make sure that if you do test positive, you can quarantine and limit your exposure to others. But hopefully with the vaccines, this round will be much more mild than we've seen in the past.
Yes. Councilmember Marissa Valeri also mentioned RSV is bad. And just make sure you've gotten your flu shot. Make sure if you're over 50 that you've gotten shingles shots. It's 2 parts. So it's really important that we protect ourselves and our loved ones. So we were going to wrap around 8 or maybe a couple minutes after. There are still a lot of questions, everything from crime, smart salt, gun safety, oversight of the Montgomery County public school system. I'm just going to toss all of these out here, and then I'll toss to each of you guys if you want to pick any of these. Transportation, the threats of transportation funding. Councilmember Van Grack wanted to ask about the reduction in emergency services, our police coverage. Our county executive has sliced that in terms of Rockville's coverage. So those are many of the, but not all of the issues. So Delegate Palaktrishkar, I'll start with you and then we'll go to the others and let's see what else we can copy.
Yeah, let me address school transparency and spending oversight there. This is one of 4 priorities for the Maryland Association of Counties and is a big priority for our county. And we are hearing it from the county executive and county council. I think this is another area, I talked before about housing and how the kind of the minimums are pretty low. This summer, I had my intern just look into, can you even see the school budget that's adopted in the other districts in the state? And it's something like 40% of districts don't even publish their adopted budget online. So there's zero transparency about how the money is getting spent. The Maryland Association of Counties is working on a bill for this session. Again, I think this is one of those cases of where I'm not sure it changes much in Montgomery County. But if people have particular concerns about issues, please don't hesitate to reach out to us, to reach out to county council members, to flag these things, like we can dig into things and get more information from MCPS, or try to, on many of these issues. One other angle I'll just answer on this one with, I am working on a bill for this session. We have seen a number of issues with not just Montgomery County, but at pretty much every school district in the state, of where when our state auditors evaluate those districts, which they do every 6 years, and Senator Kagan and I both serve on the Joint Audit and Evaluation Committee, those districts typically don't do anything when they find adverse findings. And so those will just sit and they will repeat and repeat. So we're working on a bill to have more accountability on that front, and to let the districts know, like, no, you actually are, responsible for addressing these deficiencies that the state finds.
Right. Delia Fogel.
Well, I think we have to stay on for like 4 more hours for all those questions. But I set my cell phone number, and that is my personal cell phone. So please, if anyone has any follow-up questions, feel free to call or text. I want to touch on some things that I know we're wrapping up here, which is that I just want to let everyone know tomorrow we are going to have 4 families of the Israeli hostages come visit Annapolis and share their stories with state senators and state delegates. And my office, in partnership with the new Maryland Legislative Jewish Caucus, has been working closely on this, and thought that was important to share.
Thank you. Ryan.
I'm sorry if this was mentioned earlier, but I don't recall it being mentioned. So I just want to remind everyone, as we're talking about this presidential election year, that we actually have a state constitutional amendment on the ballot this year to enshrine the abortion right protection for folks in Maryland. And Maryland state law is already very strong, but it is not enshrined in the Constitution as a protection. And given what we've seen with the repeal of Roe versus Wade by this activist, hyper-conservative Supreme Court at the federal level, even though we like to appreciate that we live in Maryland and we have these protections, nothing is guaranteed unless it's protected and enshrined as much as it can be in law. So I want to strongly encourage everybody to make sure you get out and vote in favor of the constitutional amendment to protect a woman's right to choose in the state of Maryland forever. And that will be on the ballot this fall,
Along with several other measures. So make sure you are paying attention to the ballot this fall. It's important. I want to mention, you guys can, I think, are aware that 3 people have died in my district when 911 has failed. And I've been working for 9 years on legislation, and Maryland is at the forefront of shifting to next generation 911. You might have seen in the Washington Post, on MSNBC, the last several nights, the dangerous, terrifying spike in swatting incidents. This is where somebody calls in a phony baloney 911 call and says, I think my next door neighbor just shot his wife. And they come out, the SWAT teams come out with guns blazing, all that, and they're just, husband and wife are sitting in front of the TV, and there's no blood anywhere. There's no dead bodies. That has happened against a lot of people on the Trump legal teams and judges. It's happening to more visible people, and the numbers are spiking. Luckily, the swatting bill that I had sponsored, which took a few years to pass, surprisingly, is now law in Maryland, and the consequences are strong. I am hoping that my bill to amp up the consequences for messing with our 911 systems is going to finally become law, because if those systems get jammed and your house is literally on fire, or God forbid, grandma's having a heart attack, you want to dial those 3 digits and get someone to answer the phone and send help. So I want to mention that from a public safety perspective. Also, I have started a Maryland legislative nonprofit caucus, as well as a national legislative nonprofit caucus. Legislators from other states swapping ideas and doing best practices and learning, swapping ideas, which is really fun. And we have just launched one in Maryland, and I think we're the, I don't know, 4th or 5th state to do that. And so we have our founding members here, and it is bipartisan and bicameral. Democrats, Republicans, Senate, and House. So that's kind of cool, swapping ideas. I think let's take a moment. Justin is suggesting that before we close, that to the degree that you can, if you would turn on your camera, and let's take a group picture of this fabulous gang. And if you guys can snap that, and we'll 1, 2, 3. All right. Hopefully that worked. So I think I want to respect everybody's time. It's 8:07. And so thank you for giving us a little more than an hour of your busy lives to hear about what we're up to. We love to have visitors. If you find yourself interested in coming to Annapolis, please let us know. It used to be that we would host a District 17 night in Annapolis. We can't do that now because of everything from fears of COVID and RSV and all that, and that the reception rooms are unavailable because there's a whole lot of construction at the State House, and the Department of Legislative Services building has been demolished, is being rebuilt, and so the bill drafters, the mail room, the print shop, everyone is now in the space that used to host our receptions. So we will do it again. We will do it again and welcome you all down to Annapolis at some point. But in the meantime, we love hearing from you. We love seeing you on these town hall meetings, and we appreciate your calls, emails, texts, tweets, and visits. Final comments. Let's go around the horn really fast. Reverse order. Delegate Spiegel, new guy.
It's been a really exciting first couple of weeks of my first session. Thanks to all of you for your support and for your emails and weighing in on issues. Please keep them coming.
Okay. Delegate Vogel.
Keep in touch over the course of session. If there's something that you like, something that you don't, let me know.
All right. Delegate Palakvichkar.
Thank you all for being here. Thank you for your indulgence as I did most of this meeting from my couch.
Aw. Everybody stay safe. Take care of each other. Speak out on issues and on campaigns in this critically important election year. And thank you for being Democrats. Thank you for being activists in Gaithersburg, Rockville, and the surrounding areas. We appreciate you all. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. We have an amazing team in Annapolis. We are so lucky.
Thank you, Nina. All right. Take care, everybody.